Good morning, everybody. It is another beautiful day in the Forgotten Realms. Hey, Ellen. Just pop out the chat. There we go. Alrighty. I've spread the word, so we may have some fairly random people pop into the chat today. I'm looking forward to it. Hey, Seamus. Hey, Quentin. Hey, the Hypnos. Okay, so this morning, for the cheese section of the show, we're going to be returning to one of my favourites, which is the Puhoi blue cheese. It's a classic fine blue cheese with a very creamy texture and a mild amount of blueness. The blueness actually varies a fair bit, I've discovered, amongst the Puhoi blue cheeses. You never know what you're going to get when you crack open the thick wax wrapping. And today is a special little live stream because I've got an Indiegogo which I'm going to promote to you guys. But we'll get to that in a minute. You can see the link in the description text of the video today, and it will stay there. The Indiegogo that I'm promoting is not yet live, but I thought I'd give everybody a heads up. Hey, Ruben. Hey, Jimmy. Fastest chat in the West. Thanks, man. Stanley, the one, Sinzu, Shira, Bumbling Bureaucrat, Ruben, Emilia, Kedron, Emiliano, you made it. Oh, I feel honoured. I'm so glad you guys came in. The verdict: would you recommend DMing for one, or for someone who would rather be a player but can't find enough people to start a group? Oh, you mean be a DM but can't find somebody to be a group? Would you recommend DMing for someone who would rather be a player but can't find enough people to start a group? I'm going to assume you mean wants to be a DM but can't get a group. Yeah. I mean, I regularly, fairly regularly swap between DMing and being a player. Every now and then I take a break and get out of the pilot's seat and sit down as a passenger. I mean, you're still deeply involved in the story. Good question, Jacob Wilson. Hey, Jay, if you could make cheese from any monster, which one would you? I would give a go to the Cataclysmic, otherwise known as death cheese. I would give that a go. Because it's a fantasy world, therefore you want the most notorious fantasy cheese. Yeah. Hey, William. Voltitza. Matt. Nice to see you all. The cheese wizard. Yeah. I'll accept that. BSA, you're not late. You're right on time. Kevin, Fiona, Lucas. Hey, everybody. Gorgon cheese. Yeah. Godzilla 2019. Oh, interesting. So I've no spoilers or anything, but I went and saw Avengers Endgame. It was good. It was an emotional roller coaster. What can I say? The end of a 21 movie journey, the likes of which I doubt we're going to see again anytime soon. Dragon milk cheese. Well, dragons don't have mammary glands, but dragonborn do. I'm not recommending drinking the cheese of humanoids, but why not? It's a different species, right? No weirder than drinking cow milk, isn't it? Particularly because presumably the dragonborn would consent to you taking their milk for cheese. Cows don't necessarily have a choice, so ethically Would it be wrong? Did I see the last Game of Thrones episode? Yes, I did. Wow. That was one hell of an episode. What can I say? Yeah. It was... I mean, what were we expecting? Really? Would Chimera cheese be like goat cheese? I think Chimera cheese would be different every single time you made a cheese from it. Like, it would be under a state of lactic flux. Yeah, part mammal. Yeah, Kevin. I'll watch anything with dinosaurs. What can I say? Cheese made from pink ooze. Oh, yeah, flavoured with pink ooze. Well, obviously that would be the best tasting cheese ever. So, half dragon cows. Well, Kevin, the Tarrasque is, I mean, it's the kaiju of Dungeons and Dragons, and yeah, you could say it's a directly, it's kind of, well, it's based on a French mythological creature from the Tarrasque area of France, but it's also Godzilla. It's clearly Godzilla. Do I know anything about the wyvern? Yeah, I know lots about the wyvern. For instance, the dragons in Game of Thrones are wyverns. They're not dragons because they don't have front legs. They've just got wings and back legs, which I can understand their design concerns because they want it to be a realistic creature. Like, this is the thing that gets me with fantasy authors and things. They want something to be, or simulationists, I call them, people who want things to be more realistic in fantasy games. There comes a point where you say, okay, sure, make it anatomically more correct for a creature that would have evolved on that planet. But I can't think of any creatures that breathe fire constantly. Do you know of any? Yeah, no? Yeah, me neither. Because, I mean, if they wanted to get very realistic, they could have been like, it's got two glands that release different chemicals that ignite on contact to make their fire breath. But that's not the way they went. The things definitely breathe fire. So why not give them front legs and wings? I'm going to allow that comment. Does the Tarrasque have nipples? No, it does not. No. I mean, for the purpose of story, you could say yeah. If it's absolutely hilarious at the time in game, sure, give the Tarrasque nipples. Give them all the nipples, if you want to. It's not categorically stated that they don't in any lore. It's fantasy. It's supposed to be unrealistic. We're taking a departure. Oh yeah, there's insects that can shoot burning chemicals. Good point, Aaron. Yeah, there aren't any creatures with backbones that have 6 limbs, only 4 limbs, but that's because of the Cambrian extinction. Back in the Cambrian era, which, by the way, is, you know, all those Tibetan pink salts that come from Pakistan, those are actually from the Cambrian Sea. So when creatures were on Earth were developing how many segments their body would have, therefore how many limbs they would have, that was when it was determined. So on another planet with a different ecological makeup, why not say, look, there's a surviving remnant of the Cambrian era which has more body segments, therefore more limbs. There's nothing wrong with that. Also, there's all sorts of vestigial limbs and things like that creatures have. It could just be a mutation. It's only one particular gene that determines how many segments there are in your body. A mutation of that could certainly result in creatures with 6 limbs. Also look at displacer beasts and chimera and things like that. Why not? Can we get off the subject of Tarrasque nipples? How do Tarrasque breed anyway? We don't know. There is lore to say that they do have a home planet of their own, but it's iffy. It's questionable lore. You can take it or leave it. It may be that the Tarrasque were transported around the place. So they were, individual Tarrasque were transported to different planes of existence or different spheres. Roll for strength. Have giant ice like... Oh, yeah. Well, what would I do if I was going to put parasites on a Tarrasque? It'd probably be something like the Kruthic, which would be very much like, what's that movie, Cloverfield, with the parasites falling off them and attacking people, and the parasites themselves having some sort of awful disease. Asexual, yeah, no, we don't know, Stanley. If there is another Earth similar to ours but populates vertebrates with 6 limbs, yeah. I mean, it's a very big universe. Personally, I think that most of the life out there in the universe would be microbial, and that the great deciding factor on the great filter of intelligent life, or advanced life, as we call it, is actually multicellularism. That most life forms out in the universe don't actually get to the stage of multicellularism, and that's actually the big weird thing about our planet, which has resulted in so much diversity and craziness. Absolutely, I've watched Kong Skull Island. I've watched all the King Kong movies. Oh, Taking Flight is the title of the live stream because of, thanks for mentioning that, now that we've finished the cheese segment of the show, I'm promoting a Indiegogo. Hey, thanks, Jimmy. Can you get spiders with wings? Spiders don't need wings. They spin web that they can ride. So you could make a giant spider that spins a form of buoyant web. Wow, buoyant web. How many uses would that have? Imagine rope made out of buoyant web. So there's a link in the description of the live stream today, which is to the Indiegogo 4. It's the... Let me just scroll up on that thing. The Ethnographic References for Fantasy Campaigns. And so what this is, it's a source book for world building. It also is jam-packed with a lot of engineer-designed airships, which is why there's an airship on the thumbnail of the video today. So I must admit, full disclosure, that I am financially invested in this project. So if you do back it, you'll also be helping me out quite a bit. And also I'll be involved the entire way through. So I'll be promoting the PDF once the Indiegogo has reached full funding, if it reaches full funding. The full funding target is 5,000. As far as I know, it's not going to be in a hardcover print or a book print. But, it's a PDF, so in theory you could print it out yourself. I often print out my own PDFs. It also includes, it's fully embracing the electronic medium, and it's providing animated maps and 3D maps and things like that. So there's a lot of cookie cutter stuff that you can just throw into your campaign. And it's really based on 3 different segments, which is like politics, local and national politics in your games, cultures, how to design cultures that make sense and how they interact with each other, religions, conflicts, religious wars, that sort of thing. So it's looking at the big picture stuff that quite often gets sort of left cliched in fantasy campaigns, and I find that sort of stuff really makes or breaks players wanting to interact with a society. There has to be a society for them to interact with. And talking of simulationist stuff and realism and things, it makes sense that the people who live in cities and things have got a vested interest in being in a city, because in Dungeons and Dragons and other fantasy games with flying monsters and siege engine type creatures, Tarrasques and stuff, why are there cities? Why are there nations and things? Why aren't people just scattered and living in holes in the ground all over the place? So that's the whole point. We can certainly discuss airships. So airships in Dungeons and Dragons, do you use them? I use airships in Dungeons and Dragons all the time because it makes sense. All of the materials for building airships are freely available to all of the people in D&D. Using magic and stuff makes it relatively easy to create heat sources. Like you can have an airship using a hot air technology, which is based on captured magmins, because magmins could certainly work to power airships. I'm also, yeah, Slovenian. That's why they have to use Indiegogo and not Kickstarter, because for some reason Kickstarter doesn't operate from Slovenia. I don't know why. I mean, everything's international these days. The script for, talking of flying creatures and things, the script for the Pegasus and the Nightmare is in my hot little hands here. I had to actually stop and call it enough. I had so much facts and figures on the Nightmare that it was starting to way overbalance in the form and the side of the Nightmare. I had plenty of lore on the Pegasi, but not the history of the Nightmare and people's fascination with it and all the different variants and all that sort of stuff through the history of the game. Man, I could have gone on for hours. And there were lots of really good resources, like yeah, there's tons of resources for it. So yeah. Oh yeah, good point, Dragon Turtle. If you need some advertisement, I can help with. My dad is a radio show host. Oh, nice. Yeah, certainly, Lucas. Give me a shout out, man. I would certainly appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's an Indiegogo, so it's got a funding period, so as much help as anybody can provide. Spread the word. I'm relying on you. Yeah, airships in D&D are fantastic, man, because they don't really overbalance anything. They're just a form of transport. They're essentially just a flying platform in an encounter area, much like a ship on the sea. And they're spelljammers. Yeah, spelljammers are essentially airships that go into space. There's really no difference. Recently rewatched your video on an adventure after a TPK, total party kill, and realised that many of the undead options raise some questions on the state of the person's soul and the viability of the player. Lich, Wraith, Spectre, Will-O-Wisp. Maybe some more if you look at it again. Can we get a clarification? Clarification on maybe make a part 2. Yeah. I had some, like a lot of people had some really good thoughts on that. And it was an interesting thought experiment, right? So that was me sort of going off on a tangent on what the ethereal plane is and the possibility of coming back from the dead. And a lot of people had lots of questions about the systems that I was sort of thinking of for that. So it's still on the drawing board, and I would appreciate anybody else's thoughts on it, particularly yours, Dragon Turtle, if you're hot on the topic, for some feedback on that video. Like, I was kind of wanting to include all the different undead for options for player characters who are trying to leave the ethereal plane and come back into the material world, but didn't have enough sort of oomph to create a living body for themselves. But one interesting thing about the Nightmare as a creature is that it can cross over into the ethereal plane at will, and it can cross back again with passengers. Now, this is an interesting question. Can it cross over from the ethereal plane with ethereal passengers into the material plane? So can it bring ghosts into the material plane 3 at a time, riding on a nightmare? Ooh, that's an interesting question, isn't it? You got a castle? Yeah, would it be a shame if somebody just ethereally transported in there and started filling it up with ghosts? One of the scariest creatures in D&D, because a ghost with a motive, for instance, like let's say you had a bunch of suicide troopers who killed themselves to become ghosts to get transported into a castle to possess people, which they can do perpetually, to take over and just open up the castle and let you walk in there. So you're a necromancer overlord with troops who can come back and forth from the dead, possess bodies, take over the castle for you. All you need is Nightmare. That's it. Nightmare and some willing targets. Thralls, for instance, another video that I did, are artificially created creatures that have souls, who will do anything that you command them to do. So if you have a necromancer who creates thralls out of dead flesh, creates living entities who are completely devoted to him, kills them, their souls go over into the afterlife as ghosts. They hang around on the border ethereal plane. A nightmare goes in, picks them up, transports them inside whatever domicile you want them to go into, and they transfer over as ghosts and possess people. That is a pretty foolproof plan. About the only thing you can do is, stop astral and ethereal creatures with Gorgon blood. Exactly. See, this is what happens when you become a student of D&D lore. Oh, I know what I could do to stop that. Gorgon blood. Exactly. On the actual video itself, if you could put suggestions on there, Dragon Turtle, it'd be much appreciated. The only airships you've encountered in Faerun are elven spelljammers. Yeah. But there's nothing to stop, like, particularly the island of Lantern. People who live in Chult, for instance, where there's pterodactyls, may come up with some sort of flying buggy that is transported by pterodactyls. A magic missile launcher. Yeah. You're not too late, Matt. Magic missile artillery. That would work. Why doesn't Emily think of magically enchanting the stones of their walls and complete the walls themselves? Yeah, exactly. Well, they do. So masons, interesting segue. Masons in medieval times were considered to have mystical powers. In fact, some people had their children blessed by masons and had masons consummate their, well, not consummate, what should we call it? Do like marriage ceremonies and things like that. Masons were considered to have mystical powers, which is why Freemasonry is sort of mystical as well. They had this secret society because they passed on all this information about masonry to each other, and they travelled extensively. So Masons had a pretty broad view of the world in medieval times. Like they would go from Byzantia to France, and then from there to like Italy and Turkey and stuff. They would travel all over the place. And this is when people were living in, hovels with mud floors, or reeds I should say. And reed flooring is actually pretty good. People imagine, going into a medieval village, sitting down, getting invited into somebody's hovel, and sitting down on a nice, comfortable, it's almost like tatame mats of reeds, with a little cook pot in the middle made of clay, and pottage, which is like ground up wheat, barley, dandelion, and leeks and things like that, which is thrown in there. It's quite tasty, and they've been hard at work, building a castle or a cathedral or something all day. And the masons will probably be sleeping in their workshops and things, and people will be like, I've got this infected arm, can you give it a blessing? And the masons would. It was normal for them, for people to think that they had mystical powers. And in Dungeons and Dragons, doubly so, because masons would be mixing Gorgon blood into their mortar and things like that. They'd have secret rites and ceremonies that they'd be performing to provide impregnable defenses against magical things. Tribes, yeah, tribalism. Exactly, Miller. Well, that's exactly what that the ethnographic references is all about. Ethnographic, so ethnicities in D&D. Like, for instance, you can't talk about humans in Dungeons & Dragons, particularly Faerun, without talking about their ethnicity as well. A lot of people kind of ignore that as a major aspect of Faerun. For instance, the common language that they're speaking is, I think it's based on Tharassa, which is an Italian-sounding sort of language, French-Italian-sounding language. So the common language of D&D in Forgotten Realms for 5th edition is a French-Italian-sounding language, which, a diabolical genius, yes! So if you come from the Far East, say the Thay, for instance, your common language that you speak would be influenced by Thayan language and Thayan common, and it would be difficult to discuss things with people from the Sword Coast if you had no exposure to their common language, because these places are separated by vast amounts of distance. And in Dungeons and Dragons, hey, basically D&D, how's it going? If you're from Thay or the Sword Coast and you don't have magical means of transport or airships or ride dragons or whatever, it's a really long distance to get there, and it's really dangerous to travel across land in any way, shape or form across the Forgotten Realms. So their languages would be separated from each other. People would have dialects and things like that. You'd be able to tell exactly where somebody's from by the way that they speak, even if they're speaking common. How's it going, Johnny? You back to making videos? I saw you put up a crafting video recently. Nice one. I have not yet gone and watched it, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm not even going to try pronouncing that Voltista. Spaghetti. Native Americans, yeah. The Native American mythos is in Forgotten Realms, built into Dungeons and Dragons as well, with the Plains of the Outlands and the Beastlands, the Happy Hunting Grounds. So I talk a bit about Arborea in the Pegasus video, and the Seldarine. So I start talking about the elven gods in there, but they're not really gods. They're powers of the Fae. And Tatiana, or Titania. Was it Titania or Tatia? Titania, Queen Titania. And the nature of the Seldarine and the Sealy court, and how it's mobile across the plains. They don't have a plane of their own per se. Well, there's Aravandor, but that's just one of the places where they dwell. Hey Galdoon, you made it! Yeah, there's a lot of tangents today. True. So airships. Airships made out of wood and skins. We know there's all sorts of different massive animals. So you could have the stomach of a the stomach of a giant animal of some kind. You could have the skin of a kraken. Forms the balloon of an airship. Wendigo. Yeah, we're getting to the Wendigo. We're getting to we're getting to Yetis pretty soon. Turok. Yeah, wasn't that a video game? Yeah, the Native American pantheon is awesome. Also, African gods are really awesome as well. Yeah, there's a lesser known version of Australia in the Forgotten Realms that's called Aussie. Aussie. It was spelled O-Z-Z-E because that's how Americans pronounce Aussie. Actually, we don't call it that. We call it Aussie. So it would be pronounced Aussie, not Aussie. Aussie. And little is known about that continent at all. Hey, thanks, Dancescape. Oh, it was a comic book. Yeah, some cool African legends. There's a TV show on... It's not on Netflix, on something else. It's called American Gods, which has got some interesting folklore type stuff. And there's a couple of African gods in there. One's the spider god. And the other one is... I think it is the spider god. Will we have a party when the Monster Manual vids are complete? Hell yes, we will. Turok Dinosaur Hunter. Ah, good. Goblins in a Zeppelin. Yeah, goblins are very clever in constructing things, but they're not complicated. I don't know if they would actually come up with airships by themselves, but they would certainly... goblins, of course, don't exist in a vacuum. They are part of hobgoblins, and hobgoblins certainly are smart enough to create airships. Siege weapons. So, yeah. Elven Farseers. Why are the 5 main chromatic dragons be the... would the 5 main chromatic dragons be the queens? Yeah, I suppose so. Speaking of real-world locations in D&D, is Japan anywhere of note? Well, yeah, there's Oni, for instance. There's particularly in these other D&D books, which I'm getting to. There's a lot of references to Oriental creatures. Oriental. I'm just using Oriental in the form of like D&D Oriental. So in Forgotten Realms, of course, it's Karatua. Karatua is a group of different nations that are actually way more powerful militarily than anything that Faerun has to offer. They've got an empire there which could pulverize most of the city-states of, like, if, say, Kalimshan went to war with traders of Karatua, Karatua could show up with a massive naval fleet. Hey, Kairos. Space Dragonborn. Yeah. What would you think about a homebrew world that exists 75% of it floating islands? Yeah, absolutely fine. That's called an archipelago campaign, and they're lots of fun because you can put all sorts of different things in there based on them being separated by islands. It's a really great narrative method. The great Winabuzu, the great rabbit spirit. Awesome. Yep, that's also a very good idea, Signet Wolf. They maybe have a gas that's special and keeps it afloat, and the goblins could raid places where it's found. Yep. Oh, today's cheese was a Puhui blue cheese. One of my favourites. Very delicious. I'm going to be consuming that entire block of it later today. Pretty much as soon as this video is over, I'm going to start recording the audio for the Pegasus and Nightmare script, and that'll be released probably tonight. Well, in the morning for you over in the States. Red, blue, green, white, black dragon need to be the 5 queens of D&D. Did you know what I mean? And they're a little bit taller than Godzilla. Oh, you're talking about like a what's that animated thingy? So they're like the queens of all that type of dragon. Well, they're going to run into problems with Tiamat, that's for sure. Frogs with big plasma guns or magic guns. Bullywugs. Space frogs. I'd probably use Slard in that case, if it was Space Frog. So, do you respond to comments on older videos in general, or just that video? I respond to comments all across my different videos. I can tell when people are binge watching my videos and leaving comments in older videos and things, because I can track their progress as they work their way through the close to 300 videos of the Monster Ecologies and Strategies series. May the 4th be with you. It's actually past May the 4th now in New Zealand, but thank you. And also with you. See you, Fiona. Yeah, like the stream, for sure. Yeah, Tiamat doesn't play nice with anyone, that's true. Battletoads, yeah, exactly. Man, Battletoads, they're a bit dated now. Showing our age, our grey hair. Spelljamming. So spelljamming in Forgotten Realms, it's possible. There's mentions of a spelljamming ship in Undermountain. So it's in the lore. Would dragons react negatively to airships? Yeah. Very much so. In fact, in the early history of dragons' arrival on Faerun, they grew to a sufficient strength, and then a large group of red dragons banded together into the first dragon flight, and they destroyed the Aerie Empire. So the Aerie were the avian creator race, and the Aerie definitely did have floating citadels and things like that, and spent a lot of time in the air. So the dragons destroyed them to take air superiority, essentially. And then, of course, things progressed, and they got screwed over by the elves. who were their allies and their subjects. Yeah, it's a long and complicated story. But dragons definitely would prevent races from becoming an air power. You wear your grey hairs with pride, yeah, me too. I've noticed actually a lot of X-generation people don't bother dyeing their hair and stuff. They're just aging naturally, which is nice to see. It almost makes us look older than our years because the previous generations concealed their age so much. Would a Goliath goblin hybrid be a hobgoblin? Also pretty sure the gods of the elves in the court are Lachey. Well, no. So, yes and no. I mean, the Lachey have been around for such a very long time that we don't know. Also, they have a different origin from the Seldarine. So the Seldarine are a different reality entirely. The Lachey are just popped out and thrown into a completely different universe. So they don't have any relation to anything else, per se. It's confusing, I know, but there you go. And so the Seldarine are Fey powers. They are Fey origin creatures, so they're a different dimensional breed. Also, they are celestial because they travel freely in the upper planes, and upper planes creatures are celestials. They are native to the upper planes as well as the Feywild, so they are like dreams of the celestial nature, you know. So they're like the celestial version of the Feywild. Because if the Shadowfell is a parallel dimension, and the Feywild is a parallel dimension with the same sort of geographies and stuff as the whatever world it's attached to, does it have upper and lower connections like a normal plane does? They're not demi-realms, they are worlds, right? And the Feywild is a nebulous, it's not really a world per se, it's a collection of different stories that are interconnected through make-believe lands. So it's really confusing. You don't have any grey hair yet at 50 years old. Have you checked yourselves for mutant genes and superpowers, Michael? Yeah, I know, it's kind of bizarre. My brother has got a massive, perfect head of hair, and I don't. The comparisons between us is growing further and further apart. I actually look older than him now. It's kind of weird. Does this mean that Dark Lords of the Shadowfell are also fiends? Could be. So everything doesn't have to have a corresponding, like, the Feywild is not a reflection of the Shadowfell perfectly. It's not a mirror. So there doesn't have to be a balance between the two. So just because there's celestial lords of the Feywild doesn't mean there have to be Fey lords of fiendish lords of the Shadowfell. Of course, the Raven Queen would put a stop to any sort of competition as well. But there's all sorts of demi-realms which are attached to it. Ever thought about governments of Faerun video? Yeah, I want to get into that, Regan, once I finish doing the core monster manual. I'll be talking more about locations again, doing sort of more exploring, doing a step-by-step sort of geographic overlay, overview of the Forgotten Realms, and then go into some specifics that people can vote on. But I don't quote me on that. I want to see how it goes. Yeah, Wikipedia. Yeah. How do dragons feel about spelljammers then? They're arguably better than airships. Yeah. Since there's very few spelljamming vessels in operation around Faerun, like people would be quite perplexed upon seeing one, but once upon a time there was a lot more space activity going on around Faerun. It was kind of a space hub, and the Tears of Saloon are occupied by people, for instance. Old fart, it's true. Dragons, I guess at some point were kind of used to it, and then it just sort of stopped for some reason. And I don't know. There's not a lot of, at the moment, there's not a lot of cohesive activity between dragons because of the Dragon Rage has just kind of ended recently. But that's going to start to change. And dragons are starting to get organised and form a culture and a government of their own once again. So that's something to certainly worry about. Oh, thank you, William. Yeah. Anansi, Thoth, Anubis, and Bilquis. Exactly. Anubis. You don't really think about Thoth and Anubis as being African gods, but of course they are. The Egyptian pantheon are African. African continent. Red dragons have to deal with them. Thoth is one of my favourite gods for sure. Bilquis is African and Middle Eastern. I mean, it's the Middle East of where? Africa. It's the Middle East of Africa. Dragons are too overused in the game of called Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, I know what you mean. Still, it's kind of funny though. Yes, all of the dragons are starting to work together again. It's true. So this is not good. Your Cambion worships the Raven Queen. Yeah. Governments are a very good topic in D&D, it's true. How's figuring out the aspect ratio problem? Oh yeah, thanks for bearing with me everybody with the aspect ratio problem with my video uploads lately. It's got to do with the video editing software I use is doing weird things. Like at first, I think what I have to do is not edit the aspect ratio inside the video editor, but on the file itself outside of the editor. I'm just going to play around with it and see if I get it right. You'll know when I upload the next video what progress I'm making. Not all dragons are evil, that's true. Don't forget that dragons work against each other as well. But even the metallic dragons are more interested in dragon supremacy because they're still dragons. They don't like being a shattered species. Dragons are the topic in the yeah. Dude! Spoilers. We don't talk about Halaster. I'm like, every time I reach over for my coffee, I'm about to grab a bit of cheese. Flying lizards. No, Reagan. That's just a myth. Ah, yeah. Yeah. The dragons will lose due to human plot armor. Yeah, so if, for instance, the dragons aren't worshippers of Mystra, for instance, and Mystra is the one who's in charge of the weave and in charge of limiting the level of magic in the world of the Forgotten Realms. Just in the world of Forgotten Realms, in Faerun. So if Mystra decided that the dragons were getting too powerful and getting too organized and they were killing too many of her worshippers, she would go, okay, you can get beyond 9th level spells now. And the humans would quickly craft some sort of a high magic mythal type situation which screwed the magic natured dragons over quite sufficiently, I think. So perhaps dragons, being intelligent creatures, very intelligent creatures, realize that things probably aren't going to go back to the way they were, but they are very sneaky, very clever. For instance, the evolution of song dragons and dragons that could conceal themselves in humanoid society as humanoids. That may be the tactic that the dragons take. Thanks, Stanchgate. What do you think of the space dragons from Kobold Press, Void and Light? I like them. They're pretty high powered, but again, when you get up into space in D&D, you should be pretty high level, I think. Not necessarily always high level. It can be fun to have a low level campaign that goes off into different planes of existence with the players constantly going, "Oh, we're going to get killed." Case in point is the recent broadcast Spelljammer campaign that I ran, where the characters were quite low level. Spartan laser death spell. Yep. I'm a firing my laser. Yeah, exactly. The dragons would become the Illuminati. Exactly. So, dragon conspiracy theory. Prismatic dragons. Prismatic dragons don't care. They don't care whether dragons have supremacy on any particular planet. They'll just go to a different planet. Oh, Kevin's talking about his own campaign stuff, his own world building. I'm reading it. What if the MonsterVerse three dragons based on D&D characters, red, blue, and green, are the main villains for Godzilla like Sirens of Lust? So Kevin's been talking about Godzilla, kaiju type stuff, and dragons, relationship with dragons in his own campaigns. Obviously, Kevin, we need to get in a conversation about dinosaurs at some point. The reptilians! Exactly. So you can run a reptilian Illuminati situation in your Dungeons and Dragons game. Again, that ties back into world building, ethnographies, cultures, conspiracies, politics, all that sort of stuff. Because a lot of people say, well, if there's powers of good, why would powers of good fight other powers of good? Well, they fight other powers of good because of ignorance, and ignorance is quite often cultivated by factors that are working against them from the inside. So dragons are quite capable of sowing ignorance, dissent, paranoia, terrorism, all that sort of stuff. Quite capable of doing that. Not only that, but dragons are good at manipulating other creatures. Conspiracy, and you immediately, I love that, Miller. I say conspiracy theory, Illuminati, and you immediately go to an Alex Jones quotes, "Gay frogs! The dragons are turning the frogs gay!" Yeah. I prefer dinosaurs as sentient beings instead of humans. Nah. I mean, look at our skin. Scales, buddy. We are the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs didn't go anywhere. He said the T word. Demonetized. Tarask? Yeah, dragons aren't lizards. They are not lizards. They're not reptiles. They're draconic. Draconic is a different form of life. So they're elementally infused. If you've ever done like biology classes and things like that, and you've used electricity to stimulate muscles and things like that, you'll understand that energy is a part of our system. In D&D, with draconic creatures, elemental power is a part of their biological system. So they are a different, literally a different alien species which lives on that planet. The fact that they can interbreed with things, well, that's just a fantasy quirk. Really, there's no way that a creature that different from an ordinary humanoid would be able to breed with a humanoid, biologically speaking. It just makes no sense whatsoever. So, you can argue until you're blue in the face about chainmail bikinis, but I'll just point at a half dragon, half human, and say, like, half dragons? Really? And you're arguing about chainmail bikinis? Come on, dude. You're getting awfully specific about one thing when really this is a high fantasy game. Yeah, some dinosaurs were more like mammals. They were transitioning into mammals. We are an extension of them. They became birds, they became mammals. The mammals became sea life once again, became, marine mammals. How the hell do nymphs work? Well, they're fey creatures that are plants, that form plant bodies for themselves. So nymphs are almost like elementals in a way. They exist as a spiritual state inside of plants, so they can teleport from tree to tree, and they basically extrude a wood body for themselves, a plant body for themselves from whatever tree they step out of. Who would argue about dragon boobs exactly? Like for instance, plate mail armor. It takes two people to get in and out of plate mail armor. I don't know who the hell would ever assume that you can just get in and out of plate mail armor by yourself. Obviously, doesn't know much about wearing armor, and you don't sleep in that armor. It's really hot and really uncomfortable most of the time. Like, for instance, in Game of Thrones, there's characters in that game who walk around in chainmail all the time and stuff. Chainmail's really heavy. Like, you wouldn't wear it unless you kind of needed to or were expected to. It's really heavy on your shoulders because all of that weight of the chainmail is pulling down on your shoulders all the time. It's heavy. Yes, some Celts fought naked, covered in woad. We know this. The Picts, for instance, they wore trousers. They spiked up their hair using basically dried urine and bleached it. Some of them, I think, actually filed their teeth. I'm not entirely sure if that's true or not. So there were all sorts of different subgroups and cultures in Europe. Yeah, plate mail is hot. Plate mail's really hot. Like if you're in a D&D situation, you're going in the Underdark, for instance. The Underdark is not cold. It's not a cold, dank cave. It's a hot, humid, jungle-like environment. That's why drow don't wear a lot of clothing because, and it's like skin tight and there's a lot of exposed skin because it's hot down there. It's tropical. So if you're a character who's marching down there in plate mail, it's loud, uncomfortable, very hot. If you get caught up on something, you're going to lose bits of. You're going to unstrap something and lose it because you've just squeezed through a bit of rock or something like that, and you got caught. So plate mail, and of course it's wet. So you fall into a river or something like that underground, you're going to drown unless you've got people to help you. So yeah, chainmail bikini with magic makes a lot more sense. I would much rather wear light armor that's enchanted to have the same effects as heavy armor than anything else. Yeah, in real life, you go underground, it gets hot. The Knight Errant channel, yeah. Barbarian Rage. So it's a pet peeve of mine, obviously. These realistic armor people. I mean, sure, whatever. I agree that the design of breastplates wouldn't have boobs on them. For sure. That's about as far as I'll go. If I were a crocodile, I wouldn't mind that hot environment, right? Yeah, true. Scale mail for the Underdark. Yeah, chainmail is what the drow wear. Scale and chainmail, highly flexible armor. And they make it out as material as light as they possibly can. For sure. Thanks. Thanks, Aaron. Kiwi living in Amsterdam, up late to see the best of the Kiwi streamers. Oh, thanks. Oh, they did file down their teeth. Yeah. It's pretty extreme. So, yeah. Ethnographies. The ethnicities of D&D. Yeah, Darkstrider. I'm actually planning on doing that one because it's been requested by a patron as well. So, in original D&D, the pluses of a magical item had to do with how many different planes of existence, materials from that plane of existence were involved in the creation of that thing. So they were otherworldly. So objects that combined materials from different planes of existence had a otherworldly effect because you could block the physical impact of a sword from the prime material universe. But if it had Feywild material and Abathorian steel and like abyssal steel or something like that involved in it as well, it was almost like you were trying to block different planes of existence as well. So, yeah. And these things had like an otherworldly penetration value. But also, it's not the physics of it, it's the feeling of it. Like, if a meteor falls, for instance, and you've got meteoric iron that you make a magical sword out of, that's because it's been ingrained into our brains on a sort of a mystical level that meteoric iron is magical iron, because the storytelling, the collective storytelling of our various cultures has ingrained that into us, that it's special steel. In actual fact, it's not at all. In fact, it's usually quite an inferior steel, but it's the mystical aspect of it. It's the belief that it's a magical steel that makes it so cool. So with Dungeons and Dragons, it's the same sort of thing with the magical items. We can say, look, you use otherworldly blood from this sort of creature and blah blah blah, and this sort of material from this different plane of existence. But it's the oomph that goes into it. It's the belief that people have that this thing is magical also plays an influence. It's fantasy, right? So magic is about belief and stuff as well. Slaanesh, yeah, exactly. Closest living relative of the T-Rex is the chicken. Yeah. I've heard that too. Drow mostly hate mind flayers. Up and down movement on Barraborn. Are you talking about in like on a playing surface, how you simulate up and down movement? A lot of people just represent it by stacks of dice and putting miniatures on top of dice, or dice cases. Some people make like little adjustable stands that you put your miniatures on. Sometimes if you're just using a surface that you can write on with a whiteboard marker, you just note down the elevation of a miniature, or you put a marker like a rubber band on how many feet up in the air they are, or something like that. There's lots of different methods for it. It's not too complicated. It's hard to represent things like in 3D unless you're actually holding the miniatures and talking about it. But most people manage. The power of belief, yeah. Iridium. Everyone should hate the mind flayers, yeah. Oh yeah, Sinzu, I love that bit about, the riddle of steel. In Greek mythology, Prometheus gave the secret of fire to man and was punished perpetually for it. I'll go to Slaanesh meetings on the weekend, but the rest of the week. I'm surprised that word isn't filtered out. A Dragon Walk kobold that's like Crash Bandicoot, like a high-speed kobold. That'd be awesome. Like a quickling kobold. Yeah, you could do that. Would a red dragon fight a Terraquack? Is that Tarrasque? No, it wouldn't. Someone mentioned Slaanesh. Kill the heretic. Hey, Spectre. Thank you. Red dragon that is half bronze, half red, that lives realm space in a gas giant, and Elminster supposedly put him there. Is there more backstory on him I missed? Probably. I don't know anything about that. I'm going to have to look that up. Yeah, I suppose I really should do a video on Elminster. That's kind of like doing a video on Drist. It's going to get some flack. I know it. Because as much as Drist is Salvatore's main character, Elminster is also Ed Greenwood's main character. So they get a lot of press, therefore they get some negative pushback, but it's undeserved. Ah, yeah, Prometheus. Friend to man. Notice there's no Greek myths about anybody going to rescue him. Kind of sucks. How would I stat half-dragons, dragonborn, and draconic sorcerers who have old purple shadow or hybrid rules and second ancestry. Pretty much I'd just make slight variations on their breath weapon and things like that. You don't really need to adjust a lot of things about them. Like a purple dragon is, an old school purple dragon is just a cross between a red and a blue. So I would say, look, player character, pick what type of breath weapon you want. Do you want fire or do you want electricity? No need to get overly complicated. Where would the Greek-Roman pantheon sit in the godly tier list in D&D? So it's the Greek It's the Greek and Roman pantheon are pretty much the same, although the Greeks, and you'll see in my videos when I say Heracles, not Hercules, because I use the Greek pronunciation of it, not the Roman one. So they're Greek gods, and they live in Arborea. So a part of Arborea, the outer plane of Arborea, is Olympus, Mount Olympus. Mount Olympus is interesting because it borders on Hades as well. One of the planes of Hades is actually the base underworld of Mount Olympus. So it's kind of a transitive plane as well as being a regular plane. It gets wishy-washy around the edges sometimes with planar stuff. But I talk about that in the Pegasus and Nightmare video as well. So you get a bit more comprehension on how those realms are connected and what the portals look like and what it's like traveling in those worlds. In a way. What is it with diamonds and bringing the dead back to life? Monetary value. What can I say? Also, what happened to astral diamonds? They just disappeared, 5th edition. Oh, sorry, Stanley. I missed your Goliath question. Check back on this video's message. Like, if you have questions that I've missed in the chat, please put a comment on the video, and I will answer it in the comment section for the live stream. I should point that out to everybody, because I do miss quite a bit of stuff. Gork and Morg are the best gods of 440k. Yeah. From what I gather, what you said in your attributes video, the average person should be able to carry around 150 pounds without too much effort. Yes, in Dungeons and Dragons, in the medieval world. Yeah. With a strength of 10, yeah. I think it sort of multiplies as you go up, like tiers. Or is that Palladium system? I'm not entirely sure. Do dragons protect humans from harm? Some of them do. Who is the most powerful wizard in history? That would probably be Karsus, who stole the power of a god momentarily. But in like sheer raw power, Elminster is probably one of the most powerful wizards in history because he's chosen by the goddess of magic as an icon of magic, one of her agents who represented, so he's basically immortal. That's a tricky question because it sort of crosses over different settings as well. Hard to say, and also we don't know anything about the prehistory of Dungeons and Dragons. So how powerful was the most powerful Saruk wizard, because they could cast spells well beyond 9th level? Who was the most powerful Elven wizard, because they mainly relied on group magic, high magic, to create really powerful, potent magical effects? I think the human wizards were more they didn't work together as much as the wizards of the Elven school of magic. So it's hard to say. Also, how powerful is the most powerful storm giant wizard? Don't know. Thanks, Kick-Ass Duke. Kick-Ass Duke. Would Vecna be the most powerful wizard? Yeah, you could argue that, for sure. I mean, he's attained godhood. But there's also Azuth and other wizard gods as well. They all went to Neverwinter. You think there should be some tales about Hercules rescuing Prometheus? Yeah. Heracles. Medieval commoners would carry a buckler, shield, and a sword. Yeah, mostly just like a spear and a shield. So the hoplite method, or the Spartan method of fighting, is actually really good. It's a really good method of fighting. So humans in groups would, I think, probably fight like hoplites, because spears are a lot easier to make than swords, and they're a lot more useful, really, for hunting. Whatever happened to the Titan giant subspecies? They are the Empyreans of 5th edition. Have you seen the new Unearthed Arcana Artificer? I am getting around to it. It's almost like overkill with the Artificer. It's been talked about so much, and like D&D Psionics has been talked about so much in 5th edition without actually anything concrete coming out of it, that I have an artificially inflated sense of skepticism about it. Let's put it that way. It's been like a little bit too much. Spears are battlefield weapons. Yeah. Peace is the way of life. Vector could be ethically used to stop metagaming. Yeah, for sure. It's like, you're not supposed to know that. You get turned into a homunculus. Are the orbs of Dragonkind even in 5th edition? Might have missed it. It doesn't say that they're not. Do dragons like human kids? That's an interesting point of view. Like, if you're hatched from an egg, the whole idea of carrying your live young inside you would seem really creepy to a dragon, I imagine. All polearms are battlefield weapons. Is a spear a polearm? Technically, I suppose. It's a pike, really. Soul knife. Oh. Heracles. Socrates. This is how we pronounce things in Greek. Thanks, Don. Well, it's time for me to go, everybody. Oh, how do ethereal dragons relate to the chromatic and metallic dragons? Oh, that's a good question. I suppose I'm going to have to make a ethereal dragon. I think the next dragon video that I'm going to be putting out is coming up really soon, actually. Just a matter of days, and that will be on elemental dragons. Because I'm always talking about how dragons and draconic beings are elemental in nature. Well, and a lot of people have asked what happens to dragons when they die. So we're going to be talking about that and elemental dragons. And the dragons which are called Cataclysmic dragons. So that's going to be fun. Pikes require more than one man to use effectively. Yeah, because they are really huge. I mean, they're basically designed to stop people climbing up walls and riding at them with horses. So, all the best, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to check out the Indiegogo campaign for the ethnographic references for fantasy campaigns. I'm certainly going to be looking at it. It's not live yet. It will be very shortly. And I'm looking forward to everybody making that a reality, because that's a book that I want to see published. Go and check out the website if you want to see all the airships and stuff like that. They've got all the information on it to show you basically what it's going to look like. It's a beautiful book. They've taken a lot of care and pride in. Also, because it's in the process of being written, you can contribute ideas for what you want to see in the book as well. Thanks. I like this hat too. Give it on. Hey, thank you, Spectre. Oh, dude. Thanks, Duke. Why doesn't see? This is how you keep me sticking around. Why doesn't intelligence determine how many languages your character can speak in 5e? Should that mechanic be returned? Yes, absolutely, it should. Absolutely, it should. I 100% agree with you. Absolutely, it should. I don't know why they dropped that. It's just crazy to me. You could argue that it doesn't matter how high your intelligence is. If you come from a place which just doesn't have access to extra languages, then there's no way that you could know. But anywhere where there's a wizard, for instance, you could definitely speak Nim or Gnomish, because a lot of the text and stuff on that sages read is written in Nim, in Gnomish, in Forgotten Realms, for instance. Elven, Dwarvish. The Dethic alphabet is used for a lot of different languages as well, so dwarves obviously would have an invested interest in learning the other languages which are written in their alphabet. I mean, you would gravitate towards reading things which are written in English, for instance, and you'd be like, what's that word? What's that word? Because when you think about it, the dwarves would incorporate words from other cultures that use their alphabet, because they would read that and go, what's that word? And then they'd learn it and they'd incorporate it into Dwarvish. Particularly, I'd imagine dwarves swear a lot in Orcish and Giant. So, you know. So if you can pepper starting or maximum languages, both. So it should influence both. It should be both your starting languages, starting amount of languages, and also your maximum amount of languages that you can learn. But I mean, learning languages isn't intelligence-based either. I don't personally think that the number of languages you speak is any indication of how smart you are. Really. All humans have got a fantastic capacity for language. It's just built into our brains. And I think that people that say, I can speak 8 languages, like, yeah, fantastic. Can you also play the guitar? You know, 22 languages. Right. Will I make a video on Lantern? Yes, I will. So yeah, very good question. And absolutely, you should be able to speak all sorts of different languages. And I'm fully in favour of, if you want to pepper your Dwarven language with Scandinavian swear words, absolutely. The elves lived 600 years. Illuminati, yeah. Lantern is cool. Wizard languages. Elvish, Gnomish, Draconic, Primordial, Celestial, Infernal, Abyssal, Sylvan, and Deep Speech. Yep. I don't know about Deep Speech. That's a tricky one. Also, a lot of Primordial and Celestial or Supernal. Primordial or Supernal is dangerous to speak. Dangerous to speak it. Okay, that's fine, Nicholas. I'll look out for it. Yeah, orcs are dumb and they speak 2 minimum. Orcish and common. Exactly. Look, Dave, just pawn in game of life. You use medieval swears in D&D. Gadzooks! Unhand me, you fibulous cad! Exactly. You use Dutch swear words. They must sound good. How did Lantern discover the printing press around the same time as Stargates? Exactly. Yeah. Some elves, yeah, like elven druids and things like that can live for a very long time. Poor orcs. Orcs are just fine. There's quite a few races where intelligence isn't the be-all and end-all of it. If you speak some primordial words or some supernal words, essentially you're speaking magic. So some of the words can have an influence on the actual environment. Those are the languages of beings that spoke the words of creation. So some words in supernal are runes that are used in magic. So they're not just language, they're almost like cosmic contracts, or they're tied into something greater. What are the humans doing over there? Say the word Halaster and watch what happens. Yeah, exactly. Alright, everybody. Catch you later for reals this time. What languages would work for spell semantics for role-playing? I've used Token, Elvish, and High Valyrian. I use... When I'm speaking gobbledygooky magical words, and then I listen to somebody speaking Romanian. Romanian sounds like magic to me. It's one of the reasons why I know a little bit of Romanian. Multimesca. So, yeah. You'll find that when you're just going magical words and just start spouting magical words, it's, it almost feels like everybody's got a magical language locked away in their head somewhere. Have you tried DMT? No. Okay, everybody. Catch you later.